Welcome to the McFeely Mess podcast at Inforum.com. In-depth conversations and opinion covering a variety of topics from the world of news, sports, and more. Here's Mike McFeely.
Time for another episode of the McFeely Mess podcast at Inforum.com. And our guest today is a first-time guest on the pod, one of our newer reporters here in the Forum newsroom. You might recognize her name from the radio, where she's been for a couple of years prior to coming downtown to the Forum. But it's Tasha Carvell, reporter extraordinaire for the Forum, is our guest today. Hello.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
And just so people know, give her a little background. You haven't been on the pod before. You're relatively new to our newsroom at the Forum.
That's right. It's been a month.
Yeah. Gosh. I'm surprised it's that long, which shows you how fast time flies for me. Give a little bit of your background on who you are, where you came from, what you've done.
Sure. Well, I'm born and raised Fargo girl. I went to Shanley and graduated from Shanley, and then left the state and didn't come back for 25 years. So I spent some time in Washington, D.C., worked for Senator Dorgan a little bit in D.C., and a number of other things, but most of my career in the travel industry. Worked out in California and Lake Tahoe and San Francisco for a while, which was lovely.
Yes.
Yeah, and then moved back to North Dakota with my husband and son in 2015. My husband got a job with the then Attorney General Wayne Stenjum, and we were living in Bismarck for a couple of years. Moved to Fargo in 2018.
Okay, and your dad was a reporter and editor at the Forum.
He was for most of the 70s. Yeah.
So that was before my time, because when I saw our editor, Matt Von Panan, sent out a note when you were hired here, when you were coming here, and Kevin Carvell, that was his name, or is his name, or was his name?
Is his name.
Is his
yes.
name. It was 1970s, though. So I wasn't here till early to mid-80s.
Yeah.
And I've been here forever and a day, but...
Some of my earliest memories are coming to the Forum to visit my dad.
Really? Mm-hmm. Okay. Was it on the same floor, second floor?
You know what? I'm not certain of the floor. Those memories are not that sharp. What the memories are the smell, because the printing press smell was so distinctive, and which is gone now.
Yes.
Sadly gone now. But yeah, some of my earliest memories.
And that's funny, because that's the same. My dad was a printer at the Star Tribune in Minneapolis.
Oh.
And my earliest memories, some of them of visiting him at the Star Tribune, was the smell.
Yeah.
When you walked in the building and walked like up the stairs, you went, oh my God, and that was the smell of the ink.
It's super distinctive.
It is, yep.
I loved it, though. I mean, it's a good nostalgic smell to me. I'm sure if you had to go to work in it every day, it might have been a little
but
much,
it would become normal,
yeah, sure.
right?
Right, exactly.
But that's fun. It's interesting. I wonder, like, if guys like Kolpak and others who have parents in the newspaper industry
have that same smell.
I'll have to ask Jeff when he gets back into town.
Yeah.
So, very quickly, before we move on to some of the things we want to talk about relating to some of your reporting here at the paper, you were in radio for a couple of years at KFGO as a news reporter under the esteemed Paul Juergens. What's the difference between radio and TV reporting? I've been in both worlds.
Sure.
I began newspaper business, sort of did the old, newspaper guys were kind of the latest thing to get into radio because we all know everything. And so I did that, was a talk show host for several years at KFGO. That's got 6 or 7 years, actually. Was at DAY doing the same thing for a while. But I was a talk show host. I wasn't necessarily a reporter, although you can always break news. I mean, whatever. But what's the difference between being there and being here as a news reporter? Yeah,
that's really a great question. The broadcasting element is a huge piece of it. I find myself going into interviews and making sure, my audio, I've got the right audio set up, right? And now I've realized I don't need that. That's not quite as important as it used to be. But, getting a clip of audio in radio from a voice in a story can make or break a story. Having a critical voice at the right moment of time can make a story, an award winner versus just another everyday story. So that piece is one that you don't have to worry about at the newspaper. But
you still want good quotes.
100%.
I mean, still, 100%. It's just presented in different form.
We don't need the actual voice of the person, right?
Yes. Yep.
So, right. And also, no one was really, I shouldn't say this, but very few people were going to kfgo.com to read my stories, right? They were listening to my stories on air. That was how they were consuming my stories. Now, my stories are consumed completely by the words. So obviously the writing has to be a lot more sharp. And
And you have more space, I think, as well. Is radio...
100%. My story had to be, 30 seconds was ideal. 1 minute was a very long story. We weren't public radio, right? AM radio too, right?
Yes, correct.
Not NPR.
Yep, that's a good point. Yeah.
So that was the other thing. If my stories started to approach a minute, Jergy would sort of start, cutting me down pretty quick, cutting my stories down pretty quick. So
is that, do you, and I don't want to turn this into a one versus the other thing. That's not my purpose here.
Different,
It's, do you prefer the longer version because you can write? I mean, and I know the difference again because I listen to radio, I did radio, and Juergens and those guys do great. Don Haney, they do great work.
Yeah.
But again, they're limited to 15 seconds or 30 seconds, which is not a lot of time in this world. What I find is that when I consume news and when I write news, I like to have the space to go whichever direction I want and to get in. I probably go too long, way too often, but I like the details. I like the, I don't want to leave that out. And so you just kind of keep going. Radio, it never felt like you were getting, I don't want to say the whole story, but you weren't getting the minute details of the story.
That's right. So much got left on the cutting room floor over at KFGO that made me sad. I do prefer the longer form. I mean, ultimately, when I sort of made the decision to make the jump, that was a huge piece of it because I found myself constantly, cutting my stories down and leaving pieces out that felt vital to the story, but had to go, right? So that's a luxury, I think, over on this side of the world. But they both have their place, right? Every once in a while, there's a short piece that you just want to get in there, and also I do miss capturing people's voices, the audio of their voices too.
No doubt. Yeah. And the other thing I would say is that in today's technologically advanced world, if you have a website, whether it's radio, TV, newspaper, blog, I mean, you on the website, you can go and do whatever you want.
Right. That's right. My stories were often
air.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're talking about an AM news station on the air, everything has to be really short. But because of technology, there's a way now to have deeper stories anywhere you want, and that includes the newspaper business because, back in the day, you were limited to, I need the story to be 300 words. And that still comes into play sometimes, but it came into play more often in the olden days because the printed paper only had so much space.
Sure.
And they had to get in so many stories, and you couldn't leave out a story. So instead of having 1,200 words, you'd have two stories with 600 words. And this is way deep in the weeds for anybody listening, but it's just part of the way that our business has changed.
Yeah.
That it used to be, the sports editor used to tell me, you get 600 words. And if it was 700 words, you were losing 100 words.
Right.
So it was either me making the decision of which ones to
or they're just going to chop off the
or they're just going to chop it off.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, a good editor is a good editor.
Sure.
But it's better to be able to make that decision as the writer and then work with the editor.
That's right. And I think one of the things Jergy started to do was saying on stories on air, for more on this story, you can go to kfgo.com and read more.
Absolutely. For sure. Okay. So you've been busy in the month that you've been here. You've had a wide range of stories for sure.
It has been a weird mix, yes.
Yep. But we're just going to hit on a few of them. I don't want to say more interesting, but a few of the maybe ones that we can dive into a little bit deeper because we have more space now too as we talk about these things.
Sure.
We're not limited either. One that you brought up as we were sort of chatting off the air here was a story that has pretty much flown under the radar except for you and the forum doing it. And it's a federal judge dismissed a case filed by Native Americans in North Dakota, or at least claiming to be in North Dakota, when they sued the NFL's Washington Commanders, which used to be, this is my opinion guy talking, not Tasha because she's a news reporter, the most offensive nickname in sports, hands down, no questions asked. It used to be the Washington Redskins.
That's right.
But this group that claims to be from North Dakota sued the commanders for defamation, and a North Dakota judge threw it out. Explain what's going on here.
This case caught my attention instantly because of a couple of reasons. First of all, the Commanders are my team. The Redskins. They've been my team
personal.
they've been my team since the '80s. So I, right away I thought, what is happening here? So I was very interested to start, and it was a bizarre case from the start because this group, it's called the Native American Guardians Association. And they go by the acronym of NAGA, which is fascinating.
Really close to something else.
Really close to something else, right? And so they sued the commanders because what they were trying to do at the time that they said this offense happened was petition the commanders to change their name back to the Redskins. Now that is, they are definitely in the minority when it comes to Native Americans.
Okay, so no, back up now. Say that again.
You heard that right.
Yeah, I want to make sure that I and everybody else heard that correctly. This group originally...
This group, made up of Native Americans primarily, was suing the commanders to get them, or was petitioning the commanders to get them to change their name back to the Redskins.
Okay.
They wanted the team's name to be the Redskins.
Okay.
And they've done this. NAGA's been active all over. The Illini,
Fighting Illini from Illinois.
Yes. Yep. The Cleveland Indians turning into the Guardians.
Yep.
They fought that fight. They've been fighting these fights all around the country, and this is their thing. They believe that they'd rather have what most Native Americans and people think are offensive nicknames. Mm-hmm. They'd rather have those. They believe that those are important parts of their tradition, and they want those nicknames restored.
They figure it's better to be seen and than not to be.
They take great pride in those nicknames. Okay. So
let me stop you just very quickly before we move on. I'm not going to interrupt you a lot, I promise.
Yeah.
But one of the names in the story, as you mentioned, that angle of the story stood out to me. Eunice Davidson.
Right.
And she was a person, if you go back in time, to the UND Fighting Sioux nickname.
Right.
She was very much involved with that on the side of keeping, I think I have that right, she wanted to keep the Fighting Sioux nickname
100%.
As opposed to what the NCAA wanted, and was eventually decided by the state of North Dakota under pressure, under duress from the NCAA, to change it to the Fighting Hawks.
That's right.
So there's a common thread there.
That's correct. So Eunice is the sort of one tie to North Dakota that NAGA has. She's in fact their president. And so during this petition campaign that NAGA was running to try and get the commanders, and the commanders had just changed owners away from Dan Schneider to Josh Harris, so they were trying to petition him specifically. A box owner for the commanders sent a note to one of the staffers for the commanders saying, hey, there's this petition out here, and I actually think I might agree with it, and it's Native Americans that are behind it. So what do you guys think about this? And he responded, this is a marketing guy, his name is Matt Lau, I think is his name. What do you guys think about it? And he responded, that's a fake group, right?
Oh.
So the basis of this federal suit was a defamation lawsuit against the commanders by NAGA saying you called us a fake group.
Okay. All right.
So anyway, that was the basis of but it was filed in the U.S. District Court, District of North Dakota. That was where the federal suit was filed. And the commanders pretty quickly filed a motion to dismiss based on jurisdictional issues. They said, basically, why is this filed in North Dakota? There's no reason. We don't have any connections to North Dakota. And crucially, NAGA doesn't really have many connections to North Dakota either. To which NAGA said, yes, our president lives there. We are a North Dakota company. We are a North Dakota incorporated company. In fact, they say in their complaint.
And I think, is Eunice Davidson an enrolled member of
Spirit Lake?
Yeah,
yep,
okay.
She lives up at Devil's Lake. I tried to call Eunice many times for the series of stories I did on this back at KFJO and then now at the forum, and she never responded to any of my my calls. So so they crucially said we're incorporated in North Dakota. Now that was not true. And it's unclear why they claimed something that was not true in a federal complaint.
No, probably not the best decision.
No, they're incorporated in Virginia. And most of their membership is, I mean, they've got a huge membership. It's nationwide. Not huge, I shouldn't say that. It's a decent sized membership, but Eunice appears to be maybe, besides maybe one other person, maybe her husband, the only people in North Dakota that are part of the group. So anyway, Judge Welty considered the claim, and he had some, Judge Welty tends to write really well in his orders, and he said, the only contacts to North Dakota that this case has is that Matt Lau, the employee for the Commanders who wrote the text, the offensive text,
yes,
once visited North Dakota for a wrestling tournament while in high school. I mean, and then he said, the Commanders occasionally scout football players in North Dakota. We know one prominent one. Sell tickets to North Dakota residents, but it's difficult to comprehend how Matt Lau could have had fair warning that he would be subject to North Dakota jurisdiction when he made a statement in Maryland to a woman in the Washington, D.C. area about a group that was incorporated in Virginia concerning the name of a football team that plays games in Washington, D.C. So, and by that he's
a pretty good writer, Judge Welty. That's not bad.
He's pretty great.
Gotta be looking over my shoulder here.
He dismissed the suit. He didn't look at the content of the actual defamation case really at all. He just said there's no jurisdiction.
Oh, really? He didn't even get into it. He just said
I don't have to. There's no jurisdiction. That's a hard word to say. Jurisdiction in North Dakota.
I'm reading from your story, and it's still there at inform.com, of course, because it's online. But it says, quote, the individuals and organizations involved in the alleged defamation and conspiracies are not located in North Dakota. The actions in the complaint occurred entirely outside of North Dakota. There's no indication that the alleged defamatory statement or the alleged conspiracies were directed at North Dakota or intended to cause injury that would be felt in North Dakota. In other words, no harm, no foul.
Yeah. Really, what are you doing here? And then he said, even the courts can say, well, but North Dakota still has an interest in this case. Like the courts say, we have an interest in taking this case anyway, despite all of that. And he said at the very end, we don't have any interest in adjudicating this case.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
He even said,
he was, wow.
Yeah, we're really out.
So, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but then if they wanted to, if the NAGA wanted to follow up on this, could they then refile?
Yeah, they could probably file
if they felt like spending money on.
Yeah, they could probably refile in Virginia. I don't know. I don't know exactly what their end game with it is. They also
it's because Eunice wouldn't call you back. That's why
right.
she needs to do that.
Right. The Commanders also filed a motion to dismiss based on the content of the defamation claim too, which was pretty robust. So, I'm not sure if NAGA's lawyers look at that and think, well, they'll do that wherever we go. So it'll be a tough one for us. But maybe they do have a case in Virginia or elsewhere.
The question, I guess, as to whether the Native Americans would want to continue this is you need to know what the end game is.
Right.
I mean, that would answer the question of whether they would want to continue.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't make.
I mean, their petition is still alive and well.
Right. But to me, that's almost a different thing. The petition is, if you want to change the nickname back to the Redskins, which is not going to happen, but if that's the fight you want to fight and that's the hill you want to die on, then that's a whole separate. But the issue of defamation is separate from that. That's more of you called us a name and we think it defamed us.
Right.
It doesn't have anything to do with changing the nickname.
That's right. And on its face, you're right. But in their press release that they sent out about this, it was all about the nickname change. Like it had very little to do with it. You had to really dig to understand what the claim was. Oh, it's a defamation case.
Okay.
So it really felt like it really has a lot to do with just continuing to battle over the nickname.
So then again, this is my opinion, is then this was a way to get some attention and to get in the news cycle.
Like. Yeah,
that's what it felt like. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Hard to know.
Yeah, okay.
Because they won't call me back.
I was just gonna say, keep trying Eunice though.
Maybe.
And I don't know Eunice. I was around obviously in writing when the UND nickname kerfuffle was just overwhelmed every news cycle for years or months. I don't remember her ever being shy about speaking to the media because she understood that to get our word out.
Yeah, they had a PR group that they had hired who were really insistent on speaking for them.
Okay.
And so I don't know how much that PR group was getting word to Eunice that I was trying to speak directly to her. I tried her directly a couple of times via email and by phone, but the PR group was really gatekeeping, and then the PR group quit.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
I just don't know. Maybe it seemed like a bit of a mess at the end.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
We'll move on. Another story that you wrote about, and I had written about in the past as well in column form or opinion form in this case, was the interesting case of one Rockne Earles. And we'll remind readers who Rockne Earles is and listeners, because they have no clue who we're talking about. It might ring a bell, but Rockne Earles is a gentleman who lived in Barnes County. It's Valley City for those looking for a geography lesson. And Rockne Earles was active in Republican politics in that area.
Yeah, he ran for county commissioner.
That's right. I think that he was involved with the actual party, not elected office, but the NDGOP local district. He was active, an activist, if you will, if that's the right word.
Sure.
He found himself in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, 2021. And he found himself, according to the federal government, doing things that you can't do by law, and especially if you're talking January 6th, then we're talking about storming the Capitol and some skirmishes with law enforcement and that whole thing, which in today's world, for some reason, some people think that's okay. I don't know how you look at that and say that it's okay, but the other side, like me, speaking for myself, looks at that and says, my God, that's one of the darkest days in our country. But Rockne Earles was arrested and charged by the federal government relating to the January 6th insurrection. He was not in North Dakota at the time. He was...
Yep, he was in, I don't know how you say it, Chama, New Mexico.
Chama, New Mexico. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so you have reported on this as well.
Yeah.
You go with it.
Well, so most recently, Mr. Earle's charges were amped up a bit. It wasn't so in the very first complaint against Rockne Earles, they accused him of having assaulted a Capitol Police officer, and that complaint was very detailed, and the court documents that surrounded it had photos. There's video. Mr. Earles had been a sort of a cult figure on the Sedition Hunters websites for a long time because people didn't know who he was, but they'd seen him in the videos. So he had been nicknamed. He had a funny nickname. It was Steampunk Lunk. And so because of the way he was dressed, he was wearing these sort of Mad Max goggles and a leather jacket, and he's got a shaved head. So he looked a bit like, from that era, Mad Max era.
The
so anyway,
apocalyptic, end of the world type movies.
Exactly. And he's a sort of a burly guy. So they didn't know who he was, but they were calling him Steampunk Lunk, and there, anybody. And so that was what for a year or so, 2 years after the January 6th Capitol riot, these sedition hunters, they called themselves.
And that's, by the way, there's websites out there that are trying to track people down.
Correct.
Who stormed the Capitol, assaulted police officers, and have not been identified yet. Mm-hmm. So that there are groups out there, sending out photos. Does anybody know this guy?
Exactly.
If you know this person, please contact, so that they can aid the federal authorities in tracking down the insurrectionists. Those are my words. Yeah.
So Mr. Earles was initially charged with a felony and I think 6 misdemeanors for trespassing and things like that. But then there was the felony assault, and about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, the federal government came out and did a superseding indictment, is what they call it, and now he's charged with I think 5 or 6 felonies and still 2 misdemeanors based on new evidence that they have, but they did not produce that evidence this time around, that he assaulted a second Capitol Police officer, not just 1, but 2, and that he carried with him what they call a dangerous or deadly weapon while doing so. Ooh. And that weapon specifically was a filled 20-ounce bottle of Gatorade.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's sort of interesting. I think anything can become a weapon, a dangerous or deadly weapon. I suppose if you use it for such. So apparently, they must have video or film somehow of him beating up a Capitol police officer with a Gatorade bottle, presumably according to the the new superseding indictment.
Those are much more serious charges, though.
Once you tack on dangerous and deadly weapon to,
and
so
would you
a lot
say
of
6 felonies.
Yeah, now I think he's up to 6 now.
Yeah, so that's significant.
He's in a lot more trouble than he was.
That's not a tourist guy. That's he was there.
No,
and the federal authorities believe that he did some pretty nasty things. If you're looking at 6 felonies,
that's right. He's being charged with much more serious crimes.
So do we have any idea that there's been in the news now for a couple of years, the trials and often the sentences of some of these people who have stormed the Capitol, and we always see the sort of the grainy, still shots or the grainy video, and all these people, even though they were just tourists, had on masks or goggles or wrapped themselves to not look like themselves.
Many of them did, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's been, so we followed that. This guy gets 6 years, and then they go on social media and cry about it. Then this woman gets 3 years, and they go on social media, and Donald Trump says that he'll pardon all of them, and all of that. Do we know when Rockne Earles is slated to?
I don't think there's a trial set in Rockne Earles' case. Right now, with this superseding indictment, what his defense attorneys said, I think he's got a public defender, a federal public defender said, there's a ton more discovery here, and so we need time to look at it to see if we want to challenge any of this or whatever. So they're sort of in a holding pattern, which many of these cases are. These cases are dragging for a very long time in the courts for this exact reason. I mean, they're still obviously finding new footage. I mean, they've just found, this is 2 years or 3 years after it happened, and a year and a half after he was first charged. Right. So, lots of things are changing and evolving in these cases.
You know what they say? They say the wheels of justice turn slowly. Have you ever heard that one before?
I have. And I've as a crime and courts reporter primarily over the last few years, I've come to understand that.
but I mean, and we're laughing about it, but I mean, keep in mind that this is not a television series.
Right.
This is real life. So
That's
it's not,
right.
This is not, Law and Order,
right?
Where everything's wrapped up in 40 minutes.
In an episode, right?
Correct. It's
exactly.
all. I mean, the defense does get a chance to defend. Whether that's the whole point of our justice system is there has to be evidence to charge you. The person being charged has the opportunity to dispute the evidence. There are lawyers. That's the whole point of our justice system. So if it takes a while on some of these cases, that's why you'd rather have it. And this is, I think the January 6th situation, again, was one of the darkest points in American history. But the people who are being charged with these very serious crimes have every right to have their day in court and have their verdict, either guilty or not guilty. And then the sentence, it should take a long time. That's better than not taking a long time.
That's right. And you want to get it right. I mean, these are serious crimes.
Yes.
These are serious accusations. And, any like small misstep by either side can lead to bad consequences or unjust consequences,
Correct.
right? So.
Yep. And it's, again, here's my commentary. This is me being the columnist is, whenever we see this stuff in the news, it always seems like it's somebody else from somewhere else. This guy from Texas did this, or this guy from Arizona did that. This was a guy who was active and involved in the Republican Party in Barnes County, North Dakota. And when I wrote a column about this the first time around when he was first charged, there were photos on the internet, on social media sites of him with United States Senator Kevin Cramer. And this guy, Rockne Earles, ran for county commission. Yeah,
he was on the ballot 3 months before he stormed the Capitol.
And so these are not, people somewhere else.
No, he was very much in the mainstream of the Republican Party in Barnes County.
Part of the party. He's not like some Looney Tune, well, he might have been, I guess, living in a bunker in rural Barnes County waiting for the end of the world, with a bunch of dog food and green beans stacked up against the wall of a concrete. But might have been. I don't think he was. But, he was, if you're getting your photos taken with the United States Senator, and said United States Senator can dismiss that and say, well, anybody can have a picture taken with anybody. But he had access to walk up to United States Senator and say, hello, Senator Cramer, let's take a picture. And he's not one of us, because I don't agree with his views, but he's one of us that he lives around here and was a normal person who had a job and voted and everything else.
Yep, exactly. Oriska. I think that's where he was.
Oriska.
I think that's technically where he was from.
Okay,
right,
yeah,
not far from
the Oriska Flickers, one of the great high school nicknames of all time.
That is a great high school. I don't think I knew that one.
Okay, so we'll keep updated. You'll keep us updated, I should say, on whatever new developments are in that case. Last one for you, okay? Because we're running out of time and you need to get back to work. But I guess a story that has been overwhelming this area recently has been the news of Ray Holmberg, the former state senator from Grand Forks, very powerful man, a guy who got a lot of accolades from many different people because of the way that he ran. He was the Senate Appropriations Committee chair. So he had his fingers in the purse strings for many, many years. And people in Grand Forks loved him because he took care of Grand Forks and Grand Forks County and UND and everything else, which is part of the job of a politician, is, kind of bringing the bacon back home. That's all fine. But Ray Holmberg, of course, is under federal indictment for child pornography, and it's been alleged that he went overseas to have sex with minor children or with minors. Mm-hmm. And so this has become a thing now because now Wayne Stenjum emails are part of this, possibly. It's the whole tangled web of Wayne Stenjum, Ray Holmberg, the Jason Doctor building, a million things going on. Wayne Stenjum dying, unfortunately, his emails being erased. This is a complicated story.
Yeah.
But you had a story recently that sort of was a deep dive into one angle of that, Tasha.
Sure. So when Wayne Stenjum's house was first raided, searched by, it was a Homeland Security agent and a Grand Forks police officer came to his house.
Ray Holmberg's house.
This is Ray Holmberg.
Yes, I think you said Stenjum. I think you said Wayne.
No, Wayne Stenjum's house was not raided.
Correct. It was
Ray Holmberg's house was raided. He called his friend, Wayne Stenjum. Wayne Stenjum and Ray Holmberg were longtime, well-known, good friends, on the day of that raid, of that search, and apparently told Wayne, who was the Attorney General at the time, I'm in big trouble. And we know that from a story that April Baumgarten wrote yesterday.
Yes, a voicemail that was left on Wayne Stenjum's phone from Ray said, I'm in big trouble.
Right.
After the authorities searched his house.
Exactly. And Wayne, we know from Attorney General Drew Wrigley, was aware of the investigation into Ray Holmberg because the BCI was involved. The Bureau of Criminal Investigation, which Wayne Stenjum oversees, was involved in that investigation into Ray Holmberg. So he was aware of that, had not recused himself, despite the fact that he was good friends.
Good friends for many years.
But when the federal investigators and prosecutors found out about that voicemail that Holmberg had left for Stenjum on the day of the search, they wanted to hear it. They asked Stenjum before he died if they could have that, and he, I think, said yes to that. But then he died, and then his emails were deleted, and then it was a long time of radio silence where I think there was a sense that no one would ever have any sense of what Wayne Stenjum knew about Ray Holmberg, because
Wayne Stenjum's right-hand person, Liz Brocker, famously sent an email saying we need to delete all of...
Within about 48
Troy
hours.
Seibel, I believe, was the assistant AG at the time. Is that correct? And
the chief deputy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so Liz Brocker said, we have to erase all of his emails because Wayne saved everything in all capital letters.
That's right. And we don't want a public records request.
Correct. We don't want a public records request. We have to get rid of them.
So... Anyway, fast forward to very recently, just a month ago, probably. Now, it turns out that the BCI has a copy of Stenjum's phone, and they've had it for quite some time, but only recently maybe realized that they had emails on that phone. And
because Stenjum's family wanted to get some photos off Wayne's phone.
And they asked the BCI a favor to unlock the phone for them.
Yep.
And they couldn't right away, so they just had it. They just had it in their possession for a long time, and finally their technology did unlock that phone. And made a copy of it, which that technology automatically does, and then went back to the phone went back to the family, but the copy remained on a BCI computer. Okay, so now the feds want that voicemail. They want anything else that was on that phone. They get a federal warrant for that phone, or the copy of the phone that is on the BCI computer, right? To search it for anything that might be relevant to the Holmberg case. And so my story was about that federal warrant. I talked to former U.S. Attorney Tim Purdon, who said they might not have, maybe not even needed that federal warrant because technically all of that content was in their possession. No, they didn't have to. No,
right.
It was given to them. So they might not have needed to ask for a warrant, but they did it probably wisely to be safe. You don't want to mess that one up. And then I talked to a former federal public defender, Dane DeCray, who's a Moorhead lawyer in private practice now. And he said, if I was Mark Freese, Ray Holmberg's attorney, I would think about challenging that warrant because I'm not sure that the federal prosecutors had full, what he called a nexus to search the entire phone. He said, they knew about the voicemail, so I can see a federal judge signing off on a warrant saying, yeah, you can listen to that voicemail on that phone. And if that voicemail on that phone gave you some indication that the rest of the phone would be helpful, then I might authorize a warrant for the rest of the phone. But
so he thought the search warrant was too broad.
He thought the initial search warrant might be too broad, that they shouldn't have probably asked for the whole phone, that they didn't have a good enough connection. Just because Ray and Wayne were friends doesn't mean necessarily you can search Wayne's phone. They have to have some other reason, other belief that, and the voicemail is closer, but maybe not enough to, again, search the entire phone. So he said that it's possible that Mark Freese will challenge that based on what they call a nexus, which is a legal term of art.
That's one that I actually learned because of this story. I didn't know nexus was a legal thing, honestly. I'm obviously not a lawyer.
I didn't either.
Obviously, I'm not very bright, but I didn't know that nexus was a thing.
I didn't either. I learned something new every day, like 5 times a day in this job.
So one thing that we might look out for then as observers of this is Mark Freese maybe
a motion to suppress, which would be like wanting to suppress that evidence, or a challenge. I think you can challenge a federal warrant. You can challenge any evidence gathered during a federal warrant if you have reason to believe it was. I don't know. I mean, he might. Maybe they don't find any. I mean, it's possible they don't find anything on that phone that implicates his client. In which case, it would be a fool's errand to waste everybody's time. But who knows?
Well, and that's. I mean, this is. Was it last week? And I lose track of time. Last week, it was a Friday when the emails became public. A batch of the emails from Wayne's phone Wayne Stenstrom became public, and there were 1,300 pages or something or whatever it was. And so all of us who were here in the newsroom at the time, and which is fine, that's part of the gig, is our editors assigned, say, 300 pages of the emails for each of us to look through and read and to find out what was going to be on them. And, wondering if it was something hot or something, oh my goodness, look at this.
Yeah.
The ta-da moment. As it turned out, the 300 pages that I got, there was nothing. I mean, they were.
Yeah, that was sort of very routine, everyday stuff. I mean, a lot was redacted, but the stuff that was redacted was stuff from ongoing
investigations,
lawsuits that maybe had nothing to do with the Ray Holmberg case. They were, water rights lawsuits that, know. So,
the batch I got, there was a lot of from the COVID era, there were states challenging the vaccination mandates, and remember how that was so and remains so, that the Republicans were just going nuts over the mandates and the vaccines and all this stuff. But Wayne, being the state attorney general, North Dakota signed on to these lawsuits against the federal government, against OSHA.
Yeah.
It started in Ohio, I think, but the batch that I read, it was almost all related to that, just the minutia of the different states signing on to challenge the COVID mandates.
Yeah, there's very little information that was relevant to the Holmberg case in those emails. maybe almost none.
Yeah, I saw none in my 300 pages.
And that's
pages
maybe
or
the reason why
whatever it
we
was.
got it all so quickly. I mean, we did get it pretty quickly after they, they didn't take them long to realize that there was no there there either. So, but there's apparently another 6,000 to 8,000 emails that were found on a personal laptop of Stenjum's now that they're going through now. So that's another tranche.
So we'll get those as well.
Yeah, be ready.
Don't be here on Fridays.
Yeah, like we order pizza this time maybe or something.
No, but it is interesting. I mean, it's you know all the stuff happens, and you know it better than I do as a crime and courts reporter. But I mean, part of the gig, and whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a journalist, whether you're whatever, that's part of the gig. Is a lot of it is just reading through an email from some lawmaker from somewhere in North Dakota with some theory for Wayne, and Wayne just saying, yes, thank you. We'll check into that, or whatever. And then making sure to cover his tracks by forwarding that email to somebody saying, hey, Bob, do you want to look into this, or whatever.
Sure. You realize sort of the daily monotony of those jobs.
The mundane nature of, you think that you think it's Law and Order where it's, Wayne Stenjum taking all these. It's like, no, it's a lot of emails from other state agencies saying, hey, do you guys want to be part of our Christmas gift, drive? It's sure, sounds great, and all that stuff. It's the typical stuff.
Not a lot sexy in there.
No, not really. Okay, I think we're done.
Yeah.
Is that okay being done?
Yeah, it's okay.
You keep looking at your watch. Are you either really bored with me?
No, I'm not looking at my watch. No, I'm not looking at my watch. I have a little sore on my wrist, which I managed to like.
Sorry.
Which I managed
I wanted to move you along. I thought maybe you had a phone call waiting for you.
I just was. No, I'm all good. No, we are. When is this?
I'm going to post it here like literally minutes after I get out of this room.
Okay, then I'm not going to tell you what I'm working on.
No,
Next
don't.
time.
No, don't. Next time. We'll do it again. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. Tasha Carvell, crime and courts reporter at the Forum of Fargo-Moorhead. Read her good work, and please subscribe so she can continue to do more good work. And they could buy us pizzas, too, if they want to have us dig through 13,000 emails from Wayne Stenjum. Tasha Carvell, thank you. Read her good work at inform.com. This has been the McFeely Mess Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to the McFeely Mess Podcast at inform.com. For more podcasts and columns, head to inform.com and search Mike McFeely